Well, that student's okay, so Waterloo. Figure out. Yeah, he went shoot a couple single legs and took the knee to the head twice, I guess, and.
Is that like a
Just-
concussion?
I don't know about the, I was just concerned he was okay, so the principal today, he was gonna send us a thank you for. Support. Somebody drove up from Waterloo last night, Timo went over to the hospital.
You spend the night in the hospital?
No, 9 o'clock. He was good enough to be exited and then according to the both he ate at McDonald's and went home. Sounds like a wrestling thing last year. Bounce back and let's go eat quick.
Obviously not cutting weight.
Wait, yeah. No, I think middle school, they're real. They
Yeah,
can, they can. Yeah. Travis, you can copy with your stuff. Handouts over here too. Handouts. We else want handsheets? Well, okay.
Think we're ready. We can go ahead and call the work session of the Charles City Community School District order. Do we need a roll call tonight or just one right in?
We should probably, yeah, let's just do it quick.
Okay. President Gabrick,
Here.
Vice President Mack,
Here.
Board Member Fox. Here. Board Member Schroed. Board Member Yeager. Here.
All right, our first item of business is discussion of Modus report and additional high priority projects.
Thanks, everybody, for coming out tonight. So first off, we hired an engineering firm, Modus, to come look at our needs for the high school. And so Jerry is going to take the lead on talking about Modus, along with our representative from Modus, Holly. And so they're going to go ahead and walk us through the Modus proposal and what they did as an engineering company to help give us some ideas on what the high priority items that we need to work on in the high school. So I'll turn it over to you. You want to come on up?
Yeah, questions, I'll start us. All right, so, back, I can't remember what the date was, but there was, we had RFQ that we put together to look at some things in the high school. And the things that we wanted to look at in the high school at that time was the 400 circle, the kitchen, and the kitchen and the cafeteria as our major processes that we wanted to look at for HVAC. From there, Modus did some things that expanded it. They were a little bit on that RFQ. So they did some things to expand it. So we just have some overviews on some things that that we looked at. So they looked at, in fact, the whole building for HVAC. They looked at the building also for HVAC, and then we added kiln, temperature for the kilns down in the art rooms, the, switch gear on the north end. And then we also looked at, yeah. So the HVAC system for gymnasium, cafeteria, kitchen, administrative area, 400 circle. And then we looked at art room for, play traps and also, looking at some of the reasons we're having problems with the sewer system at the art room area. And then they looked at electrical systems that, so we could handle any of the HVAC that we did with the electrical system.
So if you're following along, we put the table of contents in and that goes with the modus report. So if you wanted to look at the corresponding more details on the modus report, this front page is the table of contents that references the pages in the modus report. That's great feedback.
So to go along with that, then they broke it down and they even gave us a cost if we did it like an annual, because one of the things that we talked about is maybe we have around 850,000 that we do our capital projects on for the school system. So we looked at what could we do if maybe we decided to do part of a project with that 850,000 to keep other things running. So they broke it down in terms for us, 1 through 9, I think is what was on there, 1 through 11, excuse me. And that's on page 10 and 11 of the modus report. So this is the original one that with the modus report. So you can look at that and it breaks it down to each circle, administrative office area, cafeteria, kitchen, and so forth. So if you look on page 10 and 11, you can see that.
It's also in this handout, we copied it into here too.
But one thing we did notice in the report that I let them know, and they did cross that off, and then we'll go to another page that's even updated more. Item number 7 is replace the steam boilers with a hot water boiler system. The reason we still had that hot water boiler system when they came and did their inspection of the facilities, we still have 1 unit on this end that needs to be done. And then also the science rooms also use hot water. So we're already in that process of replacing that. We're going to budget for this next summer. The next board meeting will come with updated list that we want to do this next summer. So if we get those 2 items done, the science rooms converted over in the last area or on the roof, we'll no longer need that hot water system that is on this list. So then we went and did a few more amendments to that. And some of the amendments that we went to is we talked about looking at the sewer system, and we decided we'd do that on our own. And on the sewer system, we did have a firm come and run a camera in every one of the sewers that we have here. And the sewer that was the worst was the one that we replaced when we did the cement work on the between the high school, middle school this last summer. And as we did that, we tore all that up and put all new sewer underneath there. So all the sewers were really good. He noted 2 items that we found on the sewer system. So the main sewer that runs through from the north end through the center of the 500 circle, when it gets about halfway through the 500 circle, there is a dip in that sewer system. It's about 4 foot long, and there's some standing water in that one. All of the outer surface of the sewer system is fine in every area, except that was the only thing noted. The only other thing that we had noted was on the art room, the sewer system that comes out of the art room, then it turns and comes down and shoots out by the science room, and about 3 of them all connect out there. That one was just about plugged with clay. So after we were done with that, then we went ahead and then had them come and jet that out. So when we talked to the facility committee this last time, it was noted in the modus report on page, get to that one. Page 8, it was noted about the art room and the sewer traps needed to be up, or the play traps needed to be updated. So what we talked about a little bit in the facilities committee, let's go ahead and get that added as part of maybe a project that we're doing and get that so that takes care of that sewer system that we're having problems with. So that was added, and then we added another item on there that they that Modus also noted was we have 2 kilns in the art room area. That even though we're putting new HVAC in there, that heat that's coming off of the kilns and the undersized vent that's going out is putting too much heat in the room. So that's contradicting what we already have tried to do in that area. So we're gonna have that as part of what we'd like to propose for a project, upsize the ductwork and put a hood over top to help with that heat that's coming out of those. And the last item that last time we talked about with the Modus report was switchgear. So
Yeah, there is.
okay.
Yep, there it is.
Okay. So we have two main switch gears that come into this facility. We have one on the south end that comes into the shop area. And then we have one up here on the north end that comes in from a transformer that keeps across between high school, middle school, comes into a main switch gear that's a closet right back over here. So if you look on those page, the towards north end has big old throat switches. So that's original to the building. When we put a couple air handlers on the roof, the electrician that was installing the electricity for that couldn't get a couple of those switch gears turned off even. They were really nervous at that time that we were probably gonna maybe have to do maybe a larger project than what we thought because of that. They did get the switch gear working, so everything's good and going. But you look at the pictures of this switch gear and you compare that to the switch gear that we have on the south end that was updated. Approximate time was around 2010.
I don't think that's in your pack. Okay.
And I can
It was
show
in
you.
the board workshop.
Yeah. So here's what the switch gear looks like on the south end. Looks more like.
Yeah.
That is updated.
Yep, that looks more like the breakers that you see in your house and stuff, so that's more modern. It also has digital readouts, so you can tell what you're getting for amperage, and it's another picture that is included in this report that I got that, it has the digital readouts, so you know what your draw is and everything else. So, since that was a sort of a safety issue when we're doing that, I figured it's a good time to do that. Now, we had a couple of questions on like, do we look at maybe doing more electrical throughout the building? I'm comfortable with what electricals throughout the building, and to do more electricals throughout the building, you almost would have to do more construction unless you wanted surface mount electrical. And in a building like this, it's probably not the most ideal thing to have a lot of surface electric mount all over the hallways and everything else. But we're not having any issues with any of the electrical that are in the walls or, we've got all new LED lights throughout this whole building. There's 100% LED lights. So I think we're comfortable on what we have for electrical, other than the switchgear on this end.
And Jerry, surface mount is like a runway strip on the outside of the wall.
So if you go down to the shop
Pretty
area,
visible.
when they updated that, it's all surface mount. If you look there, there's conduit running all over. The other place that we do have some surface mount, if you go to the 600 circle, where they had to add more electrical for the kitchen area there, there's all surface mount on the outside because that's about the only way you could do it without tearing open the wall and doing it at that time. The last thing that we talked about that maybe, including if we decide that we're gonna do a project, all our bathrooms, we have one bathroom that is ADA compliant in this facility, and that's our crossroads bathrooms. And even those need to still be updated. And then we've got the cafeteria bathrooms that are not ADA compliant. They have been with newer stall dividers and things like that. They're not ADA compliant, so we need to do some modernizing there. And then the north end bathrooms that are right down here on this side of the 500 circle come down this hall are also not ADA compliant. So we're doing a project. We did some bid work on that a couple of years ago, looking at maybe possibly doing that with my own staff. So we've got some pricing on that. So we put some pricing together on that as part of the project that Modus put together for us. So that's sort of a overview of what we've done. Holly is here to help with any questions. I know one of the concerns was on what's the efficiency to going to gas, electrical, heat, and so forth. Holly can answer some of that. I've got an email from her with any of those things. So yes, any more specifics you want from me or anything like that? I think this, if we look at doing a project like this, it gets done what we need to get done. So I'm going to give you some examples of what I'm talking about in that. A lot of things that we're having problems with right now is a lot of the air handlers have some actuators on it. The actuators we used to be able to get 3-4 years ago, we used to be able to get at Granger, at the local store, and a couple other places. We have one place now that we can get the actuators that are now running us about $275 an actuator. So far this winter, we've replaced, I think, 6 of them, and we're just getting started. So they're getting harder to find, and of course with equipment. So if we're looking at what we can do for a project, what we could do, this helps plan operations, the workings of the facility. A project like this would help us tremendously to get that. So.
And if I'm a numbers guy, the art sinks, there's gonna be 6 of those. Is that what we talked about? Or that right?
Yep, correct. So let's look at one more page.
Yep.
I guess I sort of jumped away from it.
That's okay. And then, then the other thing that wasn't in this report from Modus, that we added was the bathroom. So the total of doing 6 bathroom remodel, we're estimating with our own people doing that work would be 150,000. So if I added 150,000 and another 5,000, I would get kind of the grand total down here at the bottom.
Correct.
And so,
I would like to caveat that with, that it isn't all inclusive, that budget. Those budgets don't include if we need an architect or a civil or structural engineers, and scope, so.
So if you look at this, the form in there, it's on the handout. It's the one that's in red and it's labeled 1 through 12 with a total of 2,766,000 on there. So originally what we talked about was if we did it annually. So if you look at this annually, that's 12 years of annual work. You know, a couple of them could be combined. So you're talking probably 11 years of annual work and taking about 300, anywhere from 200 to $400,000 out of the budget that we have to fix up the rest of the facilities and also this. And then you look at that also, if you spread it out over that many years, each year that number goes up and up and up. And so you're taking a project that could be around a $3 million project to $3.2 million project with just this, and probably put it more to a $5 to $6 million project with the way costs are going up. So I'm not going to go into detail, but you can read that, what they're talking about doing on each of the areas, and they broke it down. So, what do you guys got for questions for me or for Holly? Holly drove up here in this ice storm and everything else, so she is willing to answer any questions and things like that. So,
When was the last time we did a cafeteria upgrade?
cafeteria upgrade. What do you mean by cafeteria?
So like HVAC, pneumatic control, like the stuff that's on the list.
It's
Well
heating only.
before me, and I don't know, honestly, Josh, I'm not sure if this one's ever been done. It's still got the old, pneumatic controls and everything else. Nothing's on a computer. So,
Fans.
if you would guess, what would you guess, Holly?
I'm gonna guess it's never been.
regional.
Right.
I assume it's really. Yeah. Ventilation needs updated. There's limited to no cooling. It's heating only, I believe. The kitchen itself doesn't have a makeup air, or the hood is not code compliant. So
I didn't catch it. What is the time frame? Like you had said, if this was drawn out over 12 years, what would this be?
What would you,
Like the time frame of this type of project being
The
done?
committee discussed that we would,
Right.
if we
if we did this project?
can find agreements amongst ourselves and move forward, we'd have 2 public hearings.
Right, we have to set the date, and I think Tim can talk about that a little bit too.
That would be Tim.
But, yeah, we set the hearing date, and then we have, the public notice, and then if nobody in the public replies in a certain time frame, then we're able to go forward.
We'd go
I mean, it
through
gets-
the process.
Design and bid work and all that. Design, bid work from there and all that would probably take
6 months.
I guess maybe not so much like when could it get started, but like, would they do all 12 of these things simultaneously? Is that,
That
One summer's worth of
that's
work.
what we
so that was,
decided to do for
okay,
the
that's,
project.
so it would be like, you could do all that over a summer and it would not really be disruptive to the learning.
It would be tough, but anything over a summer is difficult. It all depends. We have to get it because we have long lead time items, especially if you're looking at electrical. We can have 52 to 56 week lead time. So an entire year to get your service to even start to upgrade your HVAC system to do the electrical.
But I mean, with this type of work, could classes be happening simultaneously? Like, is it super disruptive?
No.
No.
Most of this is gonna be outside, and the inside work for the air conditioning, pneumatic controls. Is fairly limited. They can do that in the summer, prepare, and then do tie-ins.
So it's not
So-
banging and disruptive to like the classroom.
Ideally, most of it would happen in the summer. You're gonna need a big mechanical contractor who can be at multiple places.
I think the goal, Bruce, was to get this approved, so we can put bids out now and be ready for the summer of 26.
That would be the quickest.
Or
The day kids are out of school, we can start, get the stuff that would be disruptive.
So for example, when we had the 3 units on the north end, we started in, I think it was April, installed those, all kids were in school. They finished, about the first week of June, so most of the work was done and students were in school.
And then this is gonna be a super just like basic 101 question, but we're talking HVAC here, so I guess our current situation in the high school is there are some places where there is not air conditioning, so this would be adding air conditioning.
This would be 100%.
Because right now, are we at like 50 for?
The 10. And then a couple, 3 window air conditioners. We got window air conditioners in the counselor's room, the administrative offices, and some window air conditioners.
So it would take,
in the 400.
it would take rid of the window
Yeah.
and it would just be central air
It would
throughout
be considered the same as central air.
Okay.
With some-
for heating and cooling. So it'd be more consistent. We wouldn't have like the 900 or the 90-degree rooms and then the 50-degree rooms, like it would be more
It would
consistent.
eliminate our boiler system entirely.
We have no boilers.
There'd be no leaking pipes underneath, nothing.
would there be anything underneath at that point in time?
No, so if there's any, the only thing that maybe would be if we got some conduit with electrical coming up through the crawl spaces, that would be it. Yeah,
Okay.
everything else would be overhead. All the units primarily would be on the roof. There's gonna be some areas, if it's spent on structural, there might be some units down on the ground. So it'd be a combination.
Yours.
Correct, in the very back of it, yeah, with full report that you've got, there's sort of a map that shows where they're thinking most of the units would go.
What's in the back of the motor sport?
And then again, going back to the 101 basic questions, the stuff that we have right now, it's getting outdated enough where we're not able to find replacement parts. This would bring us up to date, so we could easily, I mean, this is all new stuff, we're not running to this, but easier to find replacement parts for people that work on those systems.
Jerry's got staff that can work on the stuff.
And all controlled, computer controlled, so.
Just more up to date.
Very user friendly, very efficient.
So what this is really doing, this is doing a project that I've heard a lot is we're all for it. If we do a bigger HVAC, get air conditioning, get things running, and this kind of a project takes care of that. And then a few other things that help continue to make the school look better and things like that. And at some point, yeah, I'd love to do a nice building project here, and do some updating and
Which we'll talk about.
and stuff, but this takes care of a lot of things that we need right now.
This is the primary thing for infrastructure.
We'll talk about budgets a little more in a little bit, but the biggest takeaway I'm giving for Jerry's budget primarily is we're basically taking a $400,000 project off his plate every year with what he was doing with HVAC by doing this.
In one chunk.
Correct.
Because if we would have done it, we would have taken what I had to do the entire district with in half, try to get this over the next 11 years. This way, if we can do it now, I still got that 850,000, 900,000 as the money goes up a little bit, the rest of the district.
'Cause yeah, so that money would have been coming from the utilities budget, but now that frees up some of both your time and money if it was done. It's like
And
an outside with
We'll get
the,
into more detail about that money, where it comes from, how it works, but, and it doesn't affect taxpayers' dollars. But it stays the exact same and continues to go down over the next few years.
And getting rid of the steam
Yeah.
boiler and water, you're gonna save on maintenance costs, efficiency, you're gonna increase your.
So just to hit a little bit of efficiency, because that was one question I had for Holly, and this was back about the middle of November. Question someone has, okay, we're going from steam boiler that we always hear are more efficient to, electric and gas powered. So, our existing boilers are most likely around 80% or less efficient. Everything that's going in is anywhere from 90 to 97 to 92% efficient. The gas fired, air handling units are 80% efficient with the electric and 100% efficiency. So the efficiency is at least as good on some of the units that we're going to have to use to a lot better than we currently are.
And if we decide
Did I
to
get
go,
that right? Did that
Yeah.
sound right?
if we decide to go electric, rooftops with heat pump, your efficiency goes up. If you end up doing gas fired DX style, then you're gonna be around 80%. Steam boilers are in the 70s for efficiency. Typically, they can go up to 80% depending on how much condensate return you get. But-
That's if every student got working great.
Right.
And our recent experience with some of the steam traps has been that some of these little actuators, is that the term? They have plastic in them, and they used to come and they were more bronze. But this plastic with the 200-degree water or whatever, 190-degree water, engineer, correct me there. Think about that. And then the day wears out in her. And so then it's just a open flow, and so we'll have somebody say, my room's kind of warm, and it's like, oh yeah, it's about 89 here, we need to get this, a new actuator, and so then. But they come with this plastic in them, so they have a shelf life and die. And
How much is an actuator?
$700.
$300.
And so far, we've changed out 6 just in this
Oh, sure,
fall.
it's like $1,000 just a bag.
Yeah,
And like I said earlier, that's what I was talking about earlier, that you used to be able to get them about 4 different spots. We find them in one spot now. So, and if we're online and they, used to be if we get them at regular next day delivery, we'd have them. Now it's about 3 weeks minimum out, so.
So every time you.
We're putting some on the shelf now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does any of this kind of stuff like change like air quality in a space?
Yeah, you'll have, higher. Currently, you don't have any outside air, fresh air in a lot of the buildings, just natural ventilation that you have through cracks and door openings. So, you'll have, healthier buildings, with fresh air. With fresh air comes humidity, so then you have to cool it down, heat it up. It takes energy. So as far as energy bills, it takes more energy to bring that in, but
We should have the health.
healthy building.
did not have to let out early too, it's a nice to have,
Right.
the kids, could stay in school.
So after this, what we go with, all we have left in the district that's not air conditioned is about 3 areas at Lincoln School. The big gym, cafeteria, and a little bit out in the commons. Other than that, from center conditioning. Now, at some point in the future, it's quite a ways out yet, we need to look at what the geothermals doing at Washington School because it's a dump system right now. So at some point, we probably need to look at, better look at converting it over to the same silo system that we have.
When you say
Projects that
some,
Brian and I are putting on the board, that's our future that we need to look at and talk about. So some reason I've got a few things on here. But
Yeah,
I think you're always gonna have something like that in the school district. no matter what you do.
when you say it sometime in the future, are you talking 2 or 3 years,
No.
5 or 6
10,
years?
15.
Oh, all right.
The system's running very efficient. About 4 years ago, we went through the whole thing. We had budgeted money to go ahead and redo the pump because we have our own well. That has your own well because you have to constantly put water in and dump water out. So we upgraded the well. We upgraded most of the units inside the building. So right now it's running better than it was when I came here. I don't know what it is, 13, 14 years ago, whatever it is now, but when I first came here, if it got to about 10 degrees or below, we'd have to shut off the geothermal system and turn on the boiler because that system would freeze up. Now we can run it to about 5 to 10 below, which is pretty amazing. So it's running really well and efficient. Now, that's not to say there's not a set on there and there one here or there that something goes wrong and Brandon has to go fix, but that's anywhere. So wherever you're at, that's maintenance that we have. So.
I'm just gonna add on and quick address the elephant in the room. This is not a cosmetic. This is not new construction. This is fixing the bare bones. Nobody's gonna go remodel a bathroom without fix a working toilet. None of that stuff. So we want to get the essentials fixed, putting the money back into Jerry's budget when he's got this amazing staff he does. I mean, we've got certified HVAC people, we've got wonderful plumbers, everything. That we put that money back in Jerry's budget. Now we can start looking at sprucing rooms up, improving areas in-house. Thus saving money and all that stuff, so.
Any more questions directly for me or for Holly, what's from here? Very easy.
And so the next thing that came up when we were having this conversation about correction, or these items that we need to get done, was, how long would it take us to finance those? And how long would it take us? And so some of our early conversations could be 5, 6 years before we could gradually do all these items. And so then I reached out to Tim Oswald with Piper Sandler. And he was gracious enough to kind of look at our numbers and give us some information. And so if you don't know, the district takes in about $2 million in save funds every year. And then we are blessed to have the voters, the taxpayers approve a voter-approved Pebble, which is around another $800,000 a year. And then the board has supported us with a Pebble also. And so that's another $300,000 a year. That seems like a lot of money, but technology comes out of there, buses come out of there, some lease rental agreements come out of there. So we have some expenses that come out before anyone can do any fixing, and just ongoing expenses. And then also we have the middle school. The completion of the middle school also comes out of it. So in our conversations, we wanted to make sure we had enough in reserve and we were being good financial stewards for taxpayers. And then not passing on any added costs at this point in time to taxpayers. So that's when I reached out to Piper Sandler, and they were gracious to kind of work some numbers for us. And so that's what this sheet is that you have, and it's also in the back of this kind of presentation packet here. There's also a screenshot of the same thing. So it's the same thing in the back of this one near the end, and then this 2-pager. And so Kim, I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of talk us through what are some of our options. They'll pay for this and get the work done soon, and then pay for it over the next few years.
Okay. So in terms of just kind of, I thought I'd start at the beginning, and because I don't know how new board members or people have been around a while. So, the save tax is the sales tax. It's the statewide 1 cent tax. It's distributed to every school in the state based on enrollment. It's the same revenue per student, whether you're Charles City or Des Moines. And so obviously the moving parts of that tax are total retail sales in the state and enrollment in the state. And then for each individual school district, their individual enrollment as a percentage of the overall state enrollment. Does that make sense? So Brian mentioned, just over $2 million this year. You have the payments on the prior middle school bonds that take $1.1 million or so off the top. And those go through 2028. And then there's a smaller payment in 2029, and then those bonds are gone. So the remaining amount, which is plus or minus the 800,000 that you've been talking about, is what's available for other lawful uses. Doing okay so far? All right. If I say something you want to talk about, please just interrupt. So what I did is put together at the bottom of the first page there's a chart that shows you the revenues coming in, existing bond payments that go out. And then that third line there, less proposed save BNI. So this is a hypothetical $3 million loan that you take out for these purposes. And if you look at the payments there in 2026, 123,000, that's interest. There's no principal retirement in that year, it's just interest. And what I was solving for is trying to leave as much money below that for the other ongoing needs of the district. So I fell a little short of 800,000 in that first year. And then as revenues grow over time, we were able to get above 800,000. But look what happens. So 26, 27, 28, kind of similar numbers. And then in 2029, the middle school bonds are almost entirely gone, small payment left. So we can add a much larger payment on this bond. And then in 2030 and 2031, we could pay this bond off. So in a layman's term, you're talking about adding 2.5 years onto the prior bond schedule to add these projects on. And the district would be debt free in 2031. Okay? Questions? So, and I'm just using a 4% interest rate. It's a $600 or so thousand of interest cost over that period from 2025 to 2021. Now, that being said, I assume you borrow money in 2025, and the discussion that you just had, we'll have to spend more time on when you actually need to borrow the money. Maybe I've got a half a year too much interest cost in there. Basically, that'll present itself for further analysis if you decide you want to move forward.
So I'm gonna pause you right there. So when does the clock start?
When you borrow the money, so
So is that once the costs have gone, or the estimates have gone out to the companies and we sign with them and then the bond clock starts?
we would sell bonds when I'd like to, let me rephrase it. Sell bonds when you have bids in hand and you know what the bids are. But that being said, you just heard that some of the cost items, have almost a 1-year lag to them. And so if that's the case, we'll need to spend a little more time with Holly and Gary talking about, well, when will cash actually leave? The clock starts when you borrow the money, but you don't need to borrow the money until you need money.
Okay, because that's my question. So once the cash leaves, that's really kind of when.
So, and I've done none of that work yet. I mean, that's work we need to do.
Got it.
So. Okay, so this would take you out through, excuse me, this would take you out through 2031. And then you'd be debt free. The question then on the backside of that, on the second page of that question then is, well, if you wanted to do a more expansive group of projects, what kind of capacity would you have available? So I can bore you with scenarios, but we kind of came up with 4 that we thought, if I were sitting in your shoes, that would be what I would ask you. So the first 2 are, what's the maximum we could borrow? And option 1 is for 20 years and option 2 is for the life of the sales tax. Sales tax expires the end of 2050. So typically bonds, sales tax bonds have what's called a debt service coverage ratio. So that 2 million of revenue coming in, lenders aren't going to lend you every single dollar of that, since it's a maybe not entirely reliable payment source. They're going to lend you 75 or 80 cents on the dollar. Okay, so what we would call a coverage calculation. So we saw for the first 2, we saw for a coverage calculation of 1.25%, which is the kind of rating, or I'm sorry, the kind of coverage, excuse me, that you would have with a fairly good investment rating on bonds. Does that make sense or am I losing you? So 20-year borrow 18 million after we subtract out the reserve and pay bond related fees, would leave you 15.9 million available to spend on a project or group of projects. 25-year borrowing out for the life of the tax gives you 18.6 million to spend. So that answers the question, what's the max? Okay, here's a problem with what's the max, is it leaves you 450 or 500,000 left for your annual maintenance. And I think that feels short of where you'd really like it to be. Agreed. So the next 2 scenarios were to fix that issue. So scenarios 3 and 4, again, 20 and 25-year borrowings, but this time we're solving for having plus or minus 800,000 left over. And max on a 20-year issue, 11.5 million project, and on a 25-year issue, 13.5 million. So I guess from my vantage point, I guess I would tend to think something more like options 3 or 4 are what you should think about in terms of the max. The sales tax has been around a while, and one of the comments that I've heard from Brian's peers over the years is for those that went and borrowed every last penny, they called 5 years later and said, I wish I'd saved a little money. for this, that, and the other thing that I didn't anticipate. So I'd hate to see you lever completely up and then find yourself short of cash, deferring things that you would rather not defer. And cynic in me says, when you defer things, the one thing you do get to do is call me to come back and help you borrow money again later. Because you'll defer and eventually they'll get to actually be a problem and have to borrow money. So it's a sidebar. Maybe you won't have to if we reserve enough money. So. Doing okay?
And Tim, if I can interject too, the voter approved Pebble comes off in 2030. It was approved in 19, and then we have 10 years. The date it was approved, so it actually comes off in 2030. So that's another important factor. If you look at any of these scenarios, that we would definitely want to continue that voter, get the voter support in that year.
We'll ask a question there, Tim. In your scenario two here, or your second side of your options here for the max, does that take in the assumption that we're gonna maintain that voter pebble where it's at? Or is that considered what he's gonna have left over? Does that assume that he's still gonna receive that pebble, or that calculating it for him?
It ignores it. So, or in other ways, it assumes that it would continue.
So you're making your calculations off of the. Assuming that we would pursue the $3 million project. And still have the middle school expenses in that, right?
Correct.
Okay, so. For that, those numbers would change down in 2030. Because we would have, additional capital from the saved dollars that wouldn't go toward things that we use for.
Yeah, so these options, scenarios 1 through 4, take that into consideration and fill in the gap when the middle school drops off, the payments on the new bonds kick in. So on that side, the 3 million, you're correct. If all we talk about is the 3 million, come 2032, you're debt free. That whole 2 million annual revenue is unobligated. Right. Yeah. It's only when you get into the backside page where you talk about options 1 through 4, where we're maxing out. That's when we get into where wrapping the new bond payments around the middle school payments and essentially pushing the entire payment schedule out through the either 20 or 25 years. That help? I should clarify though, on the max calculations, it's not 3 million plus these numbers. These numbers are, we would subtract the 3 million out of it. I just did a simple max calc.
And then the Pebble is not on this sheet. Pebble is an additional, right now, $1.1 million a year between the voter Pebble and the board Pebble. That's in addition to the numbers here.
So in terms of process, Brian mentioned that you do have to set and hold a public hearing to borrow money against the sales tax. It's a 10 and 20 day hearing requirement. I guess that's on the backside, isn't it? There's a period of time after the hearing where if the voters presented a petition, they can force an election on the bonds in question. 15 days after the hearing. After that point in time, you're free and clear to borrow the money. Iowa law calls these bonds. I keep calling them bonds. A bond does not mean you can't go borrow the money from the local bank or from some other lender type. A bond just is a name that goes with a loan. It's no different than a note or a loan agreement or a lease agreement. It's just Iowa law limits borrowing against the sales tax to be bonds. So form over substance. Just to make sure you understood, we haven't even thought about who would lend you the money yet. That's a question we want to come back to talk about a little more. If you decide you want to keep talking moving forward, we'll come back and talk to you about pros and cons of conventional borrowings, bank loans, other types of loans.
So it seems like it would be 3 meetings on our current meeting timeline, so we have a hearing. Then are published the hearing, have the hearing, and then we have to wait 15 days. And then at the next meeting, we move forward.
I think that's whether we do this, the
Either way.
infrastructure one.
Right.
either way.
Yep.
I guess my feeling is that the infrastructure thing that we want to do at the high school is separate from any other building project. I think these are 2 different things. And my preference is to proceed with the high school infrastructure project. And anything else that we might think about doing, we should. That's a bigger conversation about what's needed at any of the other schools going down the road. And what might the district be interested in here on campus. But I think they're 2 totally separate things, and I would prefer to keep the infrastructure one separate and concentrate on that myself.
So the back page, that column in the yellow, that's money that would be available. That would that's not requiring a bond to the public,
That's if you borrowed money, so if you sold bond,
so that would be like a public vote.
no,
That would
that's
not be
just, it'd just be borrowing it as a sales tax, and would not require a bond referendum like what you had a year or so ago.
That would be like if we just quote unquote stayed in-house, we could get away with doing a project for like 17 million, like between like.
These
Right,
two
is that what you're
options,
saying?
are-
The
you can
first
do
two we
a,
did recommend.
you'll borrow this much,
Yeah.
17 million, and that's what you'll get out of it. 'Cause that's
That
what
would be like a
proves-
project doing like 13 million.
Yeah. I should address, so why is the number go down so much? Conventional bond, sales tax bonds have a payment reserve, typically a payment reserve. The payment reserve is typically 1 year's payment. So if the bond payment is annual payment's $1.5 million, $1.5 million gets peeled off the top of the bond, it goes into reserve. That reserve is your money. It earns interest. The interest accrues to the district. And if the reserve isn't needed during the life of the bond to pay the bond, it comes in to the district in the last year of the bond and you use it to make payment on the bond. So it's not, it is a deduct up front, but I want to be clear that it's not expenses. Nobody's sending you $1.5 million bills to borrow money. Or I'm in the wrong business. It's not a cost, it's a deduct that'll come out to you later.
In case we would default. Is that kind of what they're looking for?
And the worry investors have is, well, so there's 3 variables, right? The state, what if they change the sales tax code? What if they exempt something meaningful? That could change the income stream. Or, in this political environment, we could change the way we distribute and add in the non-public schools. That would change how you pursue your enrollment. And then also in total statewide enrollment. So because there's those variables, investors tend to say, you gotta have a reserve fund. And to answer the question, I've never seen it used.
School, however, defaulted on their bond payments.
No.
Because it wouldn't only be catastrophic, it just would be catastrophic for the lending institution as well.
And all the other schools who rely on that same borrowing source.
Do we have to do that?
You do not have to do a reserve.
Does it change the interest rate or the terms of the contract?
Yes, to both. It could push the rate a little higher. It could limit the number of investors willing to participate.
Does that apply to the 3?
Great question. No, because I said that I haven't really thought through, but that's a little unfair. I did jump to an assumption that because it's such a short loan, 2025 to 2031, that paying off all of the bonding related fees and reserves and everything would probably be uneconomic. And that the most advantageous option is probably to borrow from a bank. Interestingly, banks don't require reserves, they'll value. So when we can borrow money cost effectively from the bank, we always do because of that fact. It's when we get into those max calcs where we're borrowing out 20, 25 years, most banks don't like to lend that long. So,
I'm just gonna go ahead and lay our cards on the table as a facilities committee. We're gonna come fully with the proposal to move forward with the one that, the short term. Simply out of the fact of earning voter trust, public trust, that we know how to manage our money responsibly. We'll be debt-free by 2032, excuse me. At that time, we can now go in and consider one of these bigger options if we need a major remodel and things of that nature, or a new structure, any of that stuff. But this takes in, the biggest consideration for me when we've been through all this discussion is we've seen a lot of things been money spent throughout our county, and voters are on edge, I would say. With this, I don't leave it in the hands, or we don't leave it in the hands of the voters to have to support us to keep carrying on Jerry's budget. We've protected ourselves, because if for some reason the voter pebble doesn't hold, we're still safe. We'll still have that income from our saved money back.
I agree with that 100%. The other thing I think is if we did one of these and we're obligating ourselves for 20 or 25 years for a long period of time. I even though we wouldn't have to have a voter's input or a bond vote type thing, I can't ethically do that without having the voters have a say. Yeah, I just can't do it.
I guess if you drew it out 20, 25 years, what is your loan payment for the next? What's your bond payment for the next 20 years? $1 million or so? So
yeah, $1.2 million-ish.
It'd be
So it's
basically.
similar to the
taking-
middle
it's just like the middle of the
Yeah.
line, we'll just do that for like 20 more years.
Correct.
And you did work that out for me, but we didn't share that in this.
You'd be like paying for the middle school 20 more years to do a $3 million project. Well, I guess not,
No,
no,
it'd
to
be-
do the big one.
Yeah, it'd be something else, but. And then the discussion on that too, I mean, we know what we need to do with the high school, that's a known thing, now there's no discussion. What we would do with another $10 million, we'd spend months and months and months trying to figure out what we want to do with that.
Right.
And
Then this option, thinking back to what we went to the public with, we went to the bond. This would reduce, if we looked at a project, recognized we needed to remodel or add facilities to the district, that bond is gonna be cheaper or less because some of these other things have been addressed. Right?
$3 million of it right away.
In addition to the other stuff that Jerry's done,
Correct. Which.
which
like we
may
said,
be
he
more
can do-
appealing to the public. I don't know.
It seems more financially responsible, and we discussed in our last facilities meeting, we wanted to keep ourselves protected with our save money in reserves. We'd keep a little over 2 million now.
Yeah, we have 2.5 million in save reserve, and so that's a combination. So I do think at that point in time, they kind of commingle Pebble and Save in that part, in the bank account, but it's 2.5 million. At that point, because the funds can be used the same way at that point in time.
And we
So
had
yeah, we'll
discussed,
keep two.
we would keep it at, Jerry was comfortable, Dr. Bernard was comfortable with a $2 million reserve for any major catastrophic thing, say an air handler or the open loop system.
Washington School with the geothermal, we needed to redo that.
If you were to say your biggest catastrophic event to come through, with the exception of, the school being knocked down, what would be the highest expensive item you could pick?
Half of 2 million.
So you're talking $1 million and we still have that there. It just, to us, we've been beating our heads against each other trying to get to this responsible option for the community, build that trust back, show that we're handling it properly, and we addressed pretty much all of our main headaches. That makes maintaining and preventative maintenance a breeze, because you've updated your equipment so much that our staff is very, very capable of handling everything in a short matter of time. Anybody else have any questions? Comments, thoughts?
So the process then is we have to discuss this, so any vote is in a regular meeting.
We'll bring forward at the next, we'll work on the agenda for the next meeting in January. We can bring forward the hearing notice.
Great.
Yep. Then at that hearing, then we have the hearing, then we have to wait 15 days. So then it'd be, so February, then March would be the time we could.
And the hearing is just an opportunity from the public to come and say yay or nay.
Well, the public can now, with a petition of signatures, also ask it to be a public vote. So.
What is it?
Number of signatures they need for a public vote.
I always forget
I
this.
said 1,000, it's,
It's a real.
Is it a percentage
might
of
be a
the
percentage.
voting
Yeah, what was the last
population?
one?
I could look that up.
Is it the last voted school board election or the last general?
Well, last general.
Well, Waterloo recently had that, and then
Yeah,
once
recall.
they added, when they went to go make their do their high school work.
Yeah.
The voters asked for it to be voted upon, and so it was voted upon and it passed.
Just a quick thing for you, you don't need to decide this evening, but to ponder. The hearing notice will specify a dollar amount, and it will use the words not to exceed. All right, so in our heads, I think we're thinking it's 3 million. I usually advocate, add 10%, add 20% to that number to give yourself a little bit of cushion should all of the bids come in maybe a touch high, but you've got everything you wanted, maybe you have the contractors you want on the job site, all those things, and you want to take that approval. My thinking is I'd rather not have to hold a second public hearing. That's a political statement, and so if you say 3 million, then that's the number. But I typically encourage people to use not to exceed a little higher. And then for the public to make sure they understand you borrow what you need to pay for the project once it's bid. And so it's not like you're going to create a $500,000 slush fund for remodeling the administrative offices.
Great office. We don't need that. Good, thank you.
I think that's a valuable point, that you're not just collecting cash for the sake of collecting cash.
I'm gonna ask Holly one more question. When you have down here, it excludes in the budget, the contractors and things of that nature. Is that do you have a rough idea what those would be? I see there's percentages here.
Those are design. So the structural engineer, the civil engineer, it depends, do we put these units on the roof? Are we putting them on grade? And then how are we getting into the building? So it requires all three of those: civil, structural, and architect. And that little word, and then design fees, that just says none of that is budgeted. That 2.7 doesn't include structural engineer, any structural numbers that.
Your percentages, though, if we use that percentage, would that get us a good number for what we have to pay for those?
You're probably close to 3.8. You're on the higher end of 3.
Okay.
To include, just because we haven't detailed everything to know exactly what we're gonna do. Obviously, when we get into design, we can shift and change our systems to meet what we need, budget wise, but while we're here asking, I think we want to always ask high, because those are also 2024 numbers, not 2025 numbers. And this will probably be third quarter, fourth quarter, so you're well into 2025.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you much.
Thanks, everybody. If you have more questions, let me know. And
So we have a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a.
Probably moved and seconded. All in favor?
I,
Motion passes.
we did an hour.
Good, 'cause I got to be back to gym night. Everybody go over to